It's time for Ask the Expert on News Talk 1340 KWLM.
And it's expert plural today, as we've got Ross Hebrink, Financial Services Officer, and Sandy Scheffler, Insurance Specialist with Farm Credit. Used to be Farm Credit, United FCS. I'm kind of dating myself, I guess. But anyway, welcome to both of you today. Good to see you both. And a nice day for a little drive across town. Your office kind of on the south end, and we're up here on the north end. So,
it's a beautiful day out there.
It is pretty this time of the year to see the different colors. The trees are filling out. And, I think oftentimes we get so focused on, what's wrong that we forget to really, think of what's right. And, how fortunate we really are to be living where we do. And in the times we are with all the advances that have been made, and even in our lifetimes,
that's for sure.
Yeah. So, and, insurance is something that, came along to kind of, smooth the path a little bit during the rough spots, Sandy. And I suppose right now, your office getting a lot of calls with the recent cold snap we had both early Saturday and then again on Sunday morning. And I was telling you guys, even like in the northern part of the county, there was some kind of light frost even this morning on some of the grass, and I didn't see it on the rooftops, but I had a little bit on my windshield anyways.
Yes, we've been getting several phone calls, but what we're kind of basically hearing is that each day they think it's coming back, especially the corn, so hopefully it's going to not hurt it too much. So.
Right, and then monitor it very carefully here for a while yet.
Right.
As far as with insurance, would they be able to replant if they do opt for that? There's still a window to do that?
There is, yes. The first thing I would just strongly suggest is before you replant, make sure you call your agent because an adjuster has to authorize that in order for you to collect a replant payment. Just to give you an idea, if you had to replant corn on your multi-peril, you would get paid 8 bushels an acre. So it comes to $30.88. An acre payment for that. You do have to qualify. There is a rule. It's 20 acres or 20% of the unit to qualify for a replant. So,
do you anticipate you might have some of that, or not at this point?
I do not. Just from what I'm hearing from my customers that have been calling in, they do not plan as of now replanting. So.
Now, soybeans, they were saying if they were at, much emerged at all, they could have really been affected. But I think, fortunately, there were very few acres that maybe were, at risk. They had planted those later as they normally do. But
yep, I haven't had many where the soybeans were up. So
this is a big area for sugar beets too, and I know they're very temperamental. They what's the situation there? What have you been hearing?
From what I've been hearing from my customers is that a lot of them have a cover crop. They think they're fine. A lot of the field men from the beet co-op are going to go out in the next couple days to look at it. So,
is that routinely done? Is to put the cover crop in with the beets, or
normally it is?
Yeah, it's such a small seed, I suppose, for one thing, to keep maybe from blowing away and that type of thing.
Yeah, and I think that's the main purpose for it, is just for the erosion part of it, just to control that a little bit. So, but in this case, it was kind of another benefit to help kind of keep that crop, from freezing, to help insulate a little bit more.
Oh, great. That's very interesting. As we have fewer and fewer people actually doing the actual farming, and, each generation gets a little further away from it. As we drive by on the highway, we don't really realize what's all going into, raising our food and fiber, as they say. Talk a little bit about some of the edible, that seems like that's been a growing thing too, the edible beans and things like that. Is there insurance available for those crops as well?
There is edible. You can definitely buy a multi-peril revenue product on edibles that had to been purchased back in prior to March 15th also.
Right.
So.
And as far as hail insurance for that, a lot of folks that are planting those crops, they are more susceptible to when there is any slight damage. They tend to get dinged up pretty easily. And as you bring it to the processor, they're looking for that as well. So any small little blemishes or marks or anything like that, that would affect them. So On the hail insurance side, that's another benefit to make sure that, you get proper coverage in place for those crops.
Right. And usually peas is one of the first crops that's harvested. And maybe, you don't normally get hail this early in the season, but it can happen, obviously. And then, sweet corn is another thing. I think there's quite a bit raised, too, where I can see where that would be, definitely more prone to damage than even regular field corn. So.
Yep. At the right stage, that can really do a lot of damage to it. So, and I think we sell a lot when it comes to sweet corn. We sell a lot with a canning reject, right, Sandy?
Yes, a canning reject. So it's an endorsement on the hail policy.
Yeah. So if they don't take your product, then that's when you can start. It kicks in at that point.
Yep.
Yeah. What about dates like for hail insurance now? You can buy it any time right up until almost the storm, right? I mean...
Exactly. The key is definitely to get it before the hailstorm. Majority of the companies require a 2-hour waiting period in order for it to be in effect. You can basically buy it, most of them, close to harvest, but some companies may put like a township limit on it, so they may halt all sales.
And there are records that are kept years back. There are some areas that are just more prone, it seems like, to hail. It's like anything else, though, when you spin the wheel, what number is going to come up sometimes. But
exactly.
Yep. And even on that side, not only just hail, there's certain areas where we cover where more prone to wind. Mm-hmm. And that's another coverage or endorsement that we can add on to the hail insurance, is to have that wind protection for that. So in those areas, those folks that seem to have those heavier winds, they like to carry that product.
Well, it's a few years ago, but where you live, I remember there was that swath right across kind of your region there that went almost from the western border all the way across the state that did a lot of damage. And these 60 to 80 mile an hour straight winds can really wreak havoc on. Just level the crop.
Yep. And that was later in the year. That was in the fall. I think right around the mid-September range. So it was really tough. Obviously, at that point in time, not much you can do at that point. Obviously, and when it comes to harvesting, it makes it an extra challenge to be able to take that crop. So that coverage, at least when you get that wind protection, it gives you a few extra dollars of coverage to help recoup any extra expenses that you might have during the harvesting part of it. So,
are these extra coverages fairly reasonably priced? Is it something that normally would pencil out to be a good investment?
Yeah, and we can really, what it is, we sell for 6 different companies, and each company kind of has their own way of product. The basics of it are the same, but they kind of have different tweaks and that sort of thing. So we can adjust if it comes to a point where it's the cost. We're really looking at the cost, but we want to get the protection in place. You can look at getting something that has a little bit higher deductible to reduce that premium a little bit. So there's different ways that we can still get the coverage and still make it affordable.
And I imagine some of the larger producers that farm over a big geographic area, it kind of varies from crop to crop, area to area, as to what might suit their needs.
Yep, and it's the nice thing about hail insurance is you can cover it on a field by field basis. Mm-hmm. So if you are covering a whole wide area that you're farming, and there's certain areas that don't tend to get it as much, maybe you don't carry it on there, but the other areas you can put it in place.
What about in the instance of drowning out, when you get just say a 6-inch rain in June or something like that, and a good chunk of the field goes underwater and maybe the plants die? Is that covered under the multi-peril then at that point, if you have that, or? It
does cover it if it's less than the 20 acres or 20% rule for replanting, then it would basically wait till harvest. Mm-hmm. But it is covered, yes.
Yeah. So again, that harvest time, that's when those assessors would go out and take a look at fields, field by field, and determine if there is an adequate loss then at that point.
Yep.
Yeah. For hail insurance, how it's adjusted is basically after the storm is typically when it's done. They want to wait maybe 5 to 7 days, let the plant regroup and kind of see where it's at, and then we go out all the agents go out with the adjusters along with the farmer alongside and do the adjustment with them out in the field. And whereas on the multi-peril side, if there's a claim, they wait until after the year and do production counts and whatnot from there. So, yeah.
Now, different levels of coverage, maybe I'm not quite, exactly right on this, but where it's based more on what the revenue would be on an acre of land based on the history of what, is that kind of a way of buying it as well? It's like, say, where you're kind of protecting yourself a little bit with the fluctuation in market prices, too, where you've got a minimum, a floor set underneath what you will get.
Yeah, as far as the level of coverage and the amount of hail insurance coverage you take, there's a couple different ways of looking at it. One, you can kind of compare it to your multi-peril, see what you got coverage in place there, and that can vary from, you can take 70% coverage all the way up to 85%. So from there's going to be a gap as far as what's going to be what we call kind of open or anything that would not be covered under your multi-peril. And typically then that gap is what we try to cover on the hail insurance side. So that's one way of looking at it. The other way is looking at is what do you have into your crop? What do you have invested as far as your input costs? What do you need to cover for your machinery, real estate, all those sort of payments, and sort of basically cover a break-even sort of costs.
Yeah. So that, that's the bottom line. You can't have too many years where at least you're not breaking even. I mean, none of us can live that long without any salaries.
Right. That would be the absolute minimum that we want to do at that point. So, yep.
Anything else, Sandy, that we haven't covered here that you wanted to make sure you mentioned this morning?
Nope. I guess I would just encourage you, if you have any questions, you can please give our office a call at 1-800-450-1771, and you can ask for myself or Lynn Johnson or any of the other agents in the office.
And as far as any other, like with lending and things like that, Ross, what are some of the, things that you're most dealing with this time of the year, I guess?
This time of year, it has been a little bit different than most other years as far as just because of the whole farm economy. We're still kind of working through some of the operating loans. We're working and getting those things in place. So there's been a little bit lag, but we're still working at it, and we're making sure we can get those farmers out in the field and get them what they need. There's definitely been a slowdown in the machinery as far as guys just aren't buying iron anymore. They've kind of done that the last few years, kind of built their supplies up there as far as equipment to cover them and stuff. There is, on the real estate side, that is staying fairly busy on that side, between refinances or purchases or whatever it might be. The great thing is interest rates are staying very low and really surprisingly where they've been, and in some cases they've actually dropped a little bit. So that's a real benefit that we can see right now. So.
Yeah. And I know you cover a big area. I just came through Wisconsin, right through the middle of the dairy land, and I did see a couple of United FCS locations right along, I think it was, I can't remember what highway we were on, but right there prominently, right in the middle of all the dairy farms. So,
that's another area that we cover, and it helps us to kind of spread our risk out a little bit. Definitely more dairy over here and more on the cash grain side in Minnesota. So we see that as a benefit to our association.
And as you mentioned, the multiple companies you do represent or sell for this hail product. So
exactly, every company has their own little bells and whistles. So,
well, Sandy, you're a veteran, so you've seen it all, I'm sure, in your career.
Yes.
Well, thank you both, Ross and Sandy, for stopping by. Let's run that number again. The best number to reach you. Any questions?
1-800-450-1771.
And, of course, the office right on South 71, kind of on the south edge of Wilmer down there. So
yes.
Well, have a great summer. Thank you so much for coming to visit with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great to see both of you.